with the exception of Ramaswamy, I would have preferred any of those people over Trump. Ramaswamy and Trump, I would have hoped for a death match.
Ain't nothing changed, nothing new here to see. This ain't nothing but some political maneuvering. America, welcome to the eulogy, eat it up. It's called political buffoonery.
Hey there, everybody, and welcome to This Week in DUMBmocracy, where we showcase some of the dumbest newsmakers of the week. Since you guys found my tiny little political channel here, I'm sure that you're politically savvy enough to know that a lot of politics, especially during election years, is about spin control. It's about controlling your narrative. But when you are a loser like Christie, who did an abysmal job in the 2024 election cycle, a lot of that spin has to do with sad rhetoric, revisionist history, and apparently wishing death on certain of your adversaries. We're going to go into this bizarre commentary that Christie had with a Washington Post reporter in Chicago at a seminar. But before we do all that, please subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell so you don't miss any other shows. And if you like what you're seeing here in this or any other video on the channel, please be sure to smash that thumbs up button, like, comment, share the show with your friends, all that good stuff, because all that helps grow the show thanks to the YouTube algorithm.
Well, let's feed it.
Thank you guys so much for all that you're doing in helping to grow the channel. And if you're new here, hey, I'm glad you're here, and I hope that this video earns your subscription as we discuss Christie's bizarre sour grapes revisionist history at a seminar in Chicago with a Washington Post reporter. Christie appeared at this seminar at the University of Chicago's Institute of Politics, which is a nonpartisan event that's meant to be an extracurricular program designed to ignite in young people a passion for politics and public service. But forgive me if I don't feel like this is so nonpartisan when you have an anti-Trump Republican sitting down with a Washington Post reporter at the University of Chicago. Forgive my skepticism. That being said, let's go into the opening remarks from Christie and this reporter that you're about to hear.
You're about 3 months since you suspended your presidential campaign. What are your thoughts about that now? Is there any sort of big takeaway that you have now than what you had 3 months ago?
Probably not. I think when I suspended the campaign, I did it for two reasons. One, we had finally come to the conclusion that we couldn't beat Trump in New Hampshire. And so if we couldn't beat Trump in New Hampshire, we weren't beating him anywhere. So the goal of a campaign is to win. And once you determine you can't, why prolong the misery?
Well, look who just caught up.
I think that most astute political observers would have said, Christie, you had no shot from the start. In what universe would Christie think that he had any chance of beating Donald Trump? Now, listen, I'm not putting on my Trump hat here. I'm trying to look at the obvious. If you remember the beginning of the primary campaign season, the people we were talking about were Ron DeSantis and Donald Trump. There was barely any oxygen for any other candidates out there. Even over time, as DeSantis faltered, the conversation never turned to Christie. It turned to Nikki Haley. It turned somewhat to Vivek Ramaswamy. It never turned to Christie. Christie just lingered on to be the anti-Trump voice on the debate stages in order to please whatever small portion of the electorate on the Republican side that there was some voice on that stage for them. But let's get one thing straight here. He was never a threat to Donald Trump, at least in my opinion. But let me know in the comments if you think that Christie was ever a threat to either Trump or DeSantis, or even Haley, for that matter.
And secondly, there was this buzz in the media about, oh, well, if Christie drops out, Nikki Haley can then beat Donald Trump. Now, we did a lot of polling, as you might imagine, and we knew that was complete baloney.
Would it have changed, though, if you endorsed Nikki Haley?
No.
Why?
My voters didn't care.
That's an interesting assertion. Let's check what the polling was saying and see if Christie is talking out of school here or not. Here's a story from Politico back in January of this year. Polls show Christie dropping out will likely help Haley in New Hampshire, which I guess is the scuttlebutt that he was talking about, the buzz, if you will, that Christie was alluding to. But as we go through the story, we see that new polling out of New Hampshire during this week in January offered an immediate answer as to which candidate would most likely benefit from Christie dropping out. Haley, the former South Carolina governor and ambassador to the United Nations, who's been drawing from a similar pool of voters as Christie. Now, that sort of makes sense when you think about it. Christie and Haley, by this time, were mirroring the same message, going after Donald Trump personally, saying that he's unfit to be president. Because Christie was so low in the polls, the sample sizes of GOP primary voters who picked him as their first choice are small.
Well, that was awkward and horrible.
But the numbers are clear. According to a University of New Hampshire poll done with CNN, Christie stood at 12%, at a distant third from both Trump and Haley, but 2 in 3 Christie supporters, 65%, picked Haley as their second choice. So I don't know what numbers that Christie was looking at when he was saying that his voters wouldn't have gone over to Nikki Haley, but the independent polling done here seems to state otherwise.
So people, and we had, depending on the poll, anywhere from like 15 to 17% of the primary electorate in New Hampshire.
Again, remember what Politico said, such a small sample of voters that it was very hard to tell. But, he says 15, 17%. It was smaller than that. We remember, guys, right?
What we saw was that probably only 4 or 5% of the 17 were going to vote for Haley. The rest of them said either I'm voting for Biden or I'm not voting at all.
Here I come. Oh, here I come. Oh.
Now that's interesting. Christie did not have Republicans supporting him. He had Biden voters supporting him, or people who don't intend to vote at all supporting him. So when people talk about Christie's influence on the Republican electorate in 2024, he puts it himself at 5% in New Hampshire. Guys, this is not as big of an impact as people would make it seem that Christie had.
We call it AstroTurf.
But what I knew from the media narrative, which was being ginned up by Governor Haley and by Governor Sununu, was that they wanted to blame me. They knew she was going to lose.
Flashback.
Yeah, I mean, look, she spent $68 million so far, just on TV. Spent $68 million so far. I mean, who's punching above their weight and who's getting a return on their investment, And she's going to get smoked.
End of flashback.
But they didn't want her to take the blame. They wanted me to take the blame. So I'm like, well, if I'm going to lose anyway, why am I also going to get blamed for Trump winning? Thank you. Since I'm the only one who's gone after Trump in the entire primary. So I think that's the lesson of it, Leanne.
And that is the lesson of it. Let's be clear. The people who are running against Trump, the anti-Trump wing of the party, is AstroTurf. Christie admitted it himself. He had 5% of his voters going with Haley. The rest were either not showing up or voting for Biden. And moreover, Christie admits here that Haley was doing damage control and was going to use Christie as a scapegoat for her not winning in a place where she invested like $60 million of her campaign war chest. This is AstroTurf. There was no real Republican support here for this anti-Trump wing of the party. It was all just smoke and mirrors with a lot of money behind it.
I think, and I came to this conclusion then, and it's the same one now. The Republican primary was effectively over the night of the first debate.
Why?
Because Brett Baer asked all of us, if he's convicted of a felony, would you still support him? And 6 of the 8 people on that stage raised their hands, including Nikki Haley, including Ron DeSantis, including Vivek Ramaswamy, including Mike Pence. And I went up to Pence afterwards and I said, how the hell do you expect anybody watching this debate tonight to be willing to consider voting for one of us if we're telling them what Trump did is okay?
What did he say?
Not much.
And that explains a lot about the Pence campaign. But what other choice did these candidates have, really? Donald Trump has such a hold over the Republican electorate at this point. Nobody cared what anybody else had to say outside of maybe Ron DeSantis early on. Christie here is again missing the mark. He's using his own anti-Trump bias to sort of say that I was the opposition candidate. No, you weren't. You were just Trump deranged, Chris. Everyone else was trying to win over Trump's market share. You said to hell with that and just ran a Vendetta campaign.
Vendetta! Vendetta! Vendetta!
People were there to win. You were not.
And, you know, to me, I didn't realize I knew it was important that night. I didn't realize it ended it. So we had 30 million people that night watching the debate. I would think most of those people were persuadables. If they were dead set on Trump, why would you watch? He wasn't there. So I would think most of them were persuadable. And what 6 of those 8 people was just me and Asa Hutchinson who didn't raise our hands.
No one remembers him. Nobody cares.
6 of those 8 people were telling persuadable Republican primary voters this behavior is normal.
They were telling those swayable voters that the charges against Donald Trump were a partisan attack on him. That's what the line was. That's what Vivek Ramaswamy was talking about. Many people believe that the use of the Department of Justice to interfere with a campaign was a very bad thing, taking Trump out of the equation. They weren't supportive of the use of lawfare in a presidential race. Again, Christie using his Trump derangement syndrome again to rewrite history.
It's okay to have a nominee of a party for president of the United States be a criminal.
Here it is again.
Okay, so this is where Christie truly shows his derangement. Christie, a former U.S. attorney in New Jersey, is already condemning Donald Trump and proclaiming him guilty before there's any evidence presented in any trial whatsoever. We know the New York trial with Alvin Bragg, the thinnest of the legal theories, by the way, of all of the so-called Trump trials across the country. There's no evidence here that's been presented to show that Trump is a criminal. If a jury finds that, then okay, so be it. Even if it is a jury in the People's Republic of New York City, which some would say is not really Trump country. Of course, I would agree with that. But clearly, Christie just going around with this line that Trump's a criminal since day one, while everyone else was saying, let the cases go forward, let's see what the evidence is, and also saying, let's not use lawfare, I should say. That is the proper stance that a Republican should have taken. Christie took the Trump derangement syndrome stance.
Well, once you tell them that, like, how the hell do you expect them to then say, yeah, but I want you?
So did they normalize then Trump's trials, Trump's all the allegations
for that
against
period
him?
of time? Yeah. I don't think it's going to stay that way, but I think for that period of time when the trials were just hypothetical and not real, they normalized it. But by that time, the primary was over. So, you know, that I don't have any more profound thought on it, Leanne, but that is that you can't beat somebody without trying to beat them.
Or the lesson was that a former president running for election again is pretty unbeatable, regardless of whatever strategy you take, especially one as popular with the electorate as Donald Trump. Like what you see so far? Go ahead and smash that thumbs up button. Also, leave us a comment and tell us what you're thinking. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss another show. Let's get some more pearls of wisdom from Christie.
So you kind of already answered this question, but I was talking to a lot of Republicans throughout this primary, some who worked for other campaigns as well, and saying, if you're kind of in this anti-Trump lane, why not come out more forcefully against him like you have? And everyone's response would always be, look at where Christie is in the polls.
We are laughing. We are laughing at you.
Well,
And so they were saying that it was not a winning message, and so they were trying to have it both ways.
And they would be correct. Going after the most popular person in the race is not a good strategy. You want to try to pick off as many of those voters as you can without alienating those voters. Christie was openly alienating those voters. He's getting booed off the stages at these debates because he wanted to make his stand as being the anti-Trump candidate. And it didn't work out for him at all.
And not alienate Trump voters.
Well, that worked out really well, didn't it? Well, theirs was obviously a winning strategy, too. Look, there may not have been a winning strategy against Donald Trump in the primary this time. I don't know. But this much I do know. If 8 people on that stage that first night, none of us had raised our hands, it's a different story. If every one of us was saying he is unfit to be president of the United States by his character and his conduct, the voters start to hear it.
By the way, just a side note, I'm getting really annoyed by whatever sucking candy Christie has in his mouth right now. It's the clacking on the teeth and the mispronunciation. It's freaking annoying here. Just saying.
They didn't have anything to hear except for me.
Yeah.
And I don't know. I mean, it seems to me, I got triple the amount of vote in Iowa that I did in 2016.
Whoa. Okay. This is a bold-faced lie, and I'm about to show you right now. So let's take a look back at how Christie did in the Iowa caucus in 2016. If you remember correctly, Ted Cruz won Iowa in 2016. And we have to go way down to the bottom here to show that Christie got 1.8% or 3,284 votes. A very packed field. He didn't finish in the top half. He was in the bottom half in Iowa. We take a look at the 2024 results here, and we see Donald Trump won in Iowa, and Christie got 35 votes. He did not do 3 times better. He did 10 times worse. He finished behind the combined of every other no-name write-in BS candidate out there. He finished behind Asa Hutchinson, who we were talking about earlier. He finished behind Ryan Binkley. I don't even know who Ryan Binkley is. This is a complete fabrication and revisionist history by Christie.
You're fake news.
I think the power of the message would have been amplified if other people would have said it, and maybe one of them would have won. I'm not saying that would have meant I would have won, because we all come with our different baggage to every race, and some people are still angry with me because I shook Barack Obama's hand 12 years ago during Hurricane Sandy. So those people, if they're still mad, they're definitely not voting for me. So I'm not saying that I would have won, but Trump might have lost.
Well, the 2 people who did join in that message got less than 300 votes. I sincerely doubt that by others joining with that message, it would have made any lick of difference.
And I will tell you that, with the exception of Ramaswamy, I would have preferred any of those people over Trump. Ramaswamy and Trump, I would have hoped for a death match where they both die.
A literal death match.
Where they both die.
Now, if Donald Trump would have said something like that, the headlines would have been, Trump wishes death on fill in the blank. This man goes on a stage in Chicago with a Washington Post reporter wishing death on 2 fellow Republicans, and applause breaks out. This is the hypocrisy of politics, folks. This is the hypocrisy of Christie going to Chicago to discuss politics with a Washington Post reporter, clearly an audience that I would think would be majority Democrat, or at least majority anti-Trump, and cracking wise like this. Why isn't there an uproar about Christie saying he wishes death on Vivek Ramaswamy and Donald Trump? Because they are the other of politics. They are the outsiders of politics, at least according to the rhinos like Christie and the establishment Republicans out there like Haley and the like. This is the hypocrisy of politics, because those who think that they are above it all, the intelligentsia, people at a seminar like this, oh, they can be laughing about these things because aren't we smarter than everybody else that likes Donald Trump? Those rubes out there, those people who don't know any better, the ignorant voters out there, the low information Trumpers, they're all dumb. And look how smart we are in our academic circles, in this seminar in the big city, while we're all laughing and Donald Trump is winning. Folks, Chris Christie isn't a true conservative in my opinion. He may hold some conservative views, but he is no longer a person that represents the mainstream conservative viewpoints in the party because of this derangement of Donald Trump. You heard it before. It's a foregone conclusion that he is a criminal. The fact that his voters were only slightly for Haley, but the rest of them were for Biden, that was his AstroTurf. Chris Christie has lost the plot. We've known this for years because he got spurned by Donald Trump while he was in office because he wanted to be Attorney General or something like that. But it seems to me that any discussion of what happened in the 2024 Republican primary has zero to do with whatever Chris Christie thinks. The point of the 2024 primary was to determine who would lead the party. Would it be Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis? Everyone else was window dressing. Chris Christie was the voice of the Lincoln Project, the anti-Trumpers, and Democrats looking to take Trump down a peg. Clearly, he failed in that regard, and he's now relegated to seminars in Chicago with Washington Post reporters, because those are the only people who will listen to him at this point. But hey, listen, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. And please, as always, like and share the show with your friends. Subscribe to the channel. Hit that notification bell. What do you think about Chris Christie's revisionist history? Let's get into the comments together and discuss this and all the other shenanigans and buffoonery happening every day this week in DUMBmocracy.
All views and opinions expressed here are not necessarily of the mainstream media and may offend some listeners. It's called political buffoonery.